Together, we can make a difference.
Felix Morgan had a way of gripping a podium when he thought someone was wrong. Not hard, not theatrically, just both hands around the edges, shoulders loose, mouth already threatening a smile. I had learned to recognize it 6 weeks earlier, on our second date, when I told him Providence had too many restaurants that wanted to be described as intimate, when what they really meant was dark. He had argued with me for 20 minutes. Then he had kissed me outside one of them. So when Felix's hands settled around the podium at the Providence Arts Alliance fundraiser, I knew I had about 5 seconds before he disagreed with me in front of 300 people. I finished anyway. Access has to come first, I said. If a 16-year-old has to already know how the arts world works before he can enter it, then we've built a private club and put a public service mission statement on the door. There was applause, not huge applause, but enough that I smiled. Felix leaned toward his microphone, and if the building closes, because nobody bothered to create a financially sustainable institution, the 16-year-old still can't get through the door. More applause. I turned my head. He gave me the half smile. There it was. The moderator, Caroline, had known both of us long enough to enjoy this far too much. Simon? I think Felix has accidentally made my point. Felix laughed. The audience did too. Oh, good, he said. I was worried you'd gone almost 4 minutes without misrepresenting me. I should have been annoyed. Professionally, I was. Physically, less so. Felix wore a dark charcoal suit without a tie, because, according to him, ties made nonprofit executives look like men asking permission to refinance your mortgage. His sleeves weren't rolled up yet, but I knew they would be before the end of the night. They always were. He also had a faint crease beside his mouth that appeared whenever he was trying not to laugh at me. I knew because I had kissed it 3 nights earlier. Nobody in the ballroom knew that. To everyone else, Felix Morgan, managing artistic director of Bellwether Theater, and I were 2 men competing for the same donors, the same city attention, and increasingly the same square footage. The rivalry wasn't invented. That was the part people misunderstood. Harbor House Youth Arts, where I had been executive director for 5 years, believed public arts funding should reach people who normally got excluded from art spaces. Bellwether believed a city also needed professional institutions strong enough to employ artists, build audiences, develop new work, and stay alive for longer than a grant cycle. Felix and I agreed on approximately 80% of what a healthy arts community should look like. We could spend hours trying to murder each other over the remaining 20. Caroline glanced down at her card. Last question. In 1 sentence, what does Providence need most from its arts organizations over the next 10 years? Felix looked at me. Do you want to go first? No. You usually do. That's because you usually take too long. Simon. Felix. A donor in the front row called. You 2 ever agree on anything? The room laughed. I looked at Felix. Restaurants. He didn't hesitate. Not restaurants. That got a bigger laugh. Nobody there knew about the argument we'd had on our 4th date over a seafood place on South Main Street. I had called it overpriced. Felix had called my palate underfunded. We had ended the argument in his kitchen at 1 in the morning, eating cereal, because neither of us had liked the restaurant enough to finish dinner. Caroline finally reclaimed the microphone. Wonderful. Thank you both for reminding us why collaborative arts funding is going so smoothly. The panel ended to applause. Felix went one direction. I went the other. That was deliberate. The fundraiser occupied 3 floors of an old hotel ballroom, and both of us had donors, board members, staff, and people who wanted 90 seconds of our attention. We had agreed before arriving that we would work the room separately. Not because we were hiding. Neither of us was closeted. Half the people there had met men I'd dated before, and Felix had spent 12 years being openly gay in a theater community where nobody would have considered that news. But 6 weeks was 6 weeks. I liked that the relationship still belonged to us. For the moment. 20 minutes later, I found him in a service corridor beside a stack of folded banquet chairs. He was checking his phone. His sleeves were rolled up. Of course they were. You called my organization financially naive in front of the deputy mayor, I said. He didn't look up. I called your argument financially naive. Very different. Enormously. He put his phone away. Then he looked at me properly. The shift was always strange. On stage, Felix's attention had edges. He listened like he was testing every sentence for structural weakness. Alone with me, it narrowed. Not softer exactly. Closer. You were good, he said. I know. You were also wrong. There he is. He stepped toward me. A catering employee came through the double doors at the end of the corridor carrying a tray, and Felix stopped before touching me. We both moved aside. The employee thanked us and disappeared around the corner. Felix waited another second. Then his hand closed around my waist. 6 weeks was not long enough for that to feel ordinary. I hoped it never became completely ordinary. You enjoyed that, I said. The panel? Making me angry. I enjoy you when you're angry. That's a terrible quality. In you or me? Both. He kissed me, briefly. Just enough that the argument still seemed to be happening somewhere inside it. When he pulled back, I was smiling, which annoyed me. 6 weeks, I said, and you still enjoy making me look unreasonable. You were unreasonable before we started dating. That's romantic. I'm taking you to dinner Saturday. Threatening me with food doesn't improve it. You picked the restaurant, because your judgment can't be trusted. His thumb moved once against my side. I could hear voices approaching from the ballroom. Felix dropped his hand before anyone turned the corner. Not secret, just ours. For now. Saturday at 7? He asked. 7:30. You said 7. I've changed. In 48 hours? I've grown. He looked at me like he regretted ever finding me attractive. I knew better. Then his phone buzzed. Mine did too. Across the hall, the ballroom microphone came alive. Caroline's voice carried through the open doors. If everyone could come back inside, the city's cultural properties office has an announcement. Felix and I looked at each other. The joking vanished. For 4 months, the city had been reviewing proposals for Calder Foundry, a brick industrial building on the west side that had been empty since a fabrication company shut down. 30,000 square feet, high ceilings, transit access, enough room to become something significant. Harbor House had applied for the primary lease before Felix and I had ever gone to dinner. So had Bellwether. There had originally been 9 applicants, then 5. Nobody had officially said how many remained. Felix gestured toward the ballroom. After you. See? Growth. We walked in separately. My program director, Maya Alvarez, caught my arm the second I entered. You disappeared. Bathroom. You look very pleased with the bathroom. I support good municipal plumbing. She frowned at me. Maya was 36, terrifyingly competent, and mostly interested in whether I remembered to approve payroll on time. She turned toward the stage as Caroline introduced Martin Shaw from the city. Felix had taken a place 15 feet away, beside Bellwether's board chair. We didn't look at each other. Martin thanked everyone for supporting the arts. He thanked the review committee. He thanked the organizations that had submitted proposals. My pulse picked up. Maya whispered, "If he thanks one more person, I'm leaving." Then Martin said, "After the final review, we've selected 2 organizations to proceed to the public presentation stage for the Calder Foundry lease." The room went quiet. The first is Harbor House Youth Arts. Maya grabbed my forearm. People around us started clapping. My chest went tight with relief. 7 months. That was how long we had before our current landlord reclaimed 2 of our largest rooms for commercial redevelopment. Calder Foundry wasn't merely exciting. It was the difference between expanding and spending a year shrinking. Martin waited for the applause to settle. The second finalist is Bellwether Theater. I heard the reaction before I looked at Felix. Laughter. A few cheers. Someone behind me said, "Of course." Felix was already looking at me. There was no smile this time. For the first time that night, the room understood something correctly. We were rivals. Not theatrical ones. Not the fun kind people put on fundraiser panels because donors liked sparks. 1 building, 2 organizations. One of us would get it, the other wouldn't. An hour later, after congratulations and questions and 3 separate people telling me they couldn't wait to see Felix and me fight it out, I found him on a narrow terrace outside the 2nd floor lobby. He was alone. Providence was warm below us, traffic moving slowly through downtown. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then Felix asked, "Are you planning to stop seeing me?" It was so direct I almost laughed. "No." He nodded. "Good. Are you?" "No." That was easy. It probably shouldn't be. "No." We stood beside each other at the railing. I could feel the heat of his arm without touching him. We need rules, I said. Obviously. No proposal details. Nothing confidential. No asking each other questions we wouldn't ask another applicant. Agreed. No using dates to gather intelligence. Felix glanced over. You think I'm sleeping with you for your operating projections? I'm very good with spreadsheets. That's what drew me in. I smiled despite myself. Then Felix's expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. We're both going to try to win. It wasn't a question. I looked out over the street. Yes. And if one of us does, we'll deal with it then. That answer sounded reasonable. At the time, I even believed it. Felix touched the back of my hand with 2 fingers, hidden by the railing. Below us, somebody leaned on a car horn. Inside, the fundraiser went on. I looked at him and wanted 2 things with equal sincerity. I wanted Saturday night, and I wanted Felix Morgan to lose. Bellwether Theater looked less impressive from backstage than it did from the audience. That was the first thing I learned. The second was that Felix swore more at work than he did on dates. I arrived 10 minutes before the end of rehearsal on Thursday and was directed through a side door by a volunteer who recognized my name and gave me the kind of smile people used when they thought they understood the joke. He's on stage, she said. Of course he was. Bellwether's current building had once been a church hall. The audience saw dark wood, careful lighting, and a compact stage that made every production feel more expensive than it was. Backstage, the illusion collapsed. There were cables taped to the floor, folding tables covered with paintbrushes, 3 costume racks occupying a hallway clearly designed for one, and a sign over a storage closet that said, "If you put another chair in here, Felix will know." I liked that more than I expected. I stood near the back while Felix worked through the end of a scene with an actor who looked about 23 and increasingly convinced he had chosen the wrong profession. "No," Felix said from the aisle. "And you're saying it like you want him to forgive you." The actor stopped. "I thought he does. Eventually. Not yet." Felix stood. His jacket was gone. Sleeves rolled. There was a pencil behind one ear. He walked toward the stage. "Right now, you don't want forgiveness. You want to survive the next 30 seconds without admitting you need it." The actor stared at him. Felix pointed toward his own chest. "Don't make the scene cleaner than the character is." Something about that sentence stayed with me. The actor tried again. Better. Even I could hear it. Felix didn't praise him immediately. He let the silence sit, then nodded once. There. Again. I had seen Felix argue in committee meetings, charm donors, negotiate with vendors, and make a waiter laugh while sending back an undercooked piece of fish. I had never seen him direct. He wasn't gentle. He wasn't cruel either. He paid attention with his whole body. When the actor finally got through the scene, without collapsing into the easier emotional choice, Felix smiled. The kid visibly relaxed. Good. Keep the ugly part. Rehearsal ended 10 minutes later. Felix spotted me, before I'd decided whether to pretend I had just arrived. His expression changed. There was that narrowing again, that private focus. He crossed the stage toward me. "You came early. I was told punctuality makes people attractive. Who told you that?" "No one you'd know." He stopped in front of me. Up close, he looked warm from work. A little flushed, hair slightly out of place. It was deeply inconvenient. "Give me 5 minutes," he said. "Take 7. I'm observing your financially sustainable institution." His eyes narrowed. "Careful. I haven't said anything. Your face has. My face supports the arts." He laughed and disappeared backstage. I wandered toward the lobby. That was when I heard Felix arguing with his production manager. Not loudly, enough that I could follow the important parts. The issue was a block of low-cost community performances scheduled for late autumn. Ticket revenue was weak. Staffing them was expensive. The production manager wanted to reduce the number. Felix didn't. "If we cut every performance that doesn't carry itself," he said, "we become exactly what everyone accuses us of being. Felix, we can't lose money on principle. We lose money on new work every season. That's development. This is access." I stopped near a poster case. I should have kept walking. Instead, I listened. Not for strategy, not even deliberately. I listened because I had spent months telling people Bellwether's community programming sat too far from the center of its mission. And here was Felix, arguing to protect it, when no donors were watching, when no committee was scoring him. When he had no reason to perform goodness for me, I hated how useful the information was. I hated more that it made him attractive. He came out 5 minutes later, carrying his jacket over one shoulder. You look suspicious. I've been studying your propaganda. Find anything incriminating? Your lobby carpet. He looked down. I've been trying to replace that for 6 years. Maybe your big new building will have better carpet. The joke landed differently now. We both noticed. Felix didn't push. Ready? Yes. At dinner, I didn't mention what I'd overheard. Not because it was confidential, because I didn't know what to do with it yet. 2 nights later, Felix saw Harbor House in return. He wasn't supposed to. A youth theater rehearsal had gone long because half of Studio B had been closed after water damage, which meant 2 programs were sharing one room, and everybody was pretending that 38 teenagers, rotating through 12 chairs, was an educational model. Maya was standing in the middle of the corridor with a clipboard. This is not sustainable. Nothing about adolescence is sustainable. I'm serious, Simon. So am I. Have you met them? She looked toward the ceiling. I took the clipboard. We can move the Saturday group to the partner school. They already have basketball. Sunday? They have church rental. Great. I'll ask God. Maya glared. Then she saw someone behind me. Her whole expression changed. I turned. Felix stood near the entrance carrying nothing. No flowers, no coffee, no heroic solution. Just Felix. I thought we were meeting at 7:30, I said. It's 7:15. You've become dangerously punctual. I was nearby. Maya looked from him to me. She knew who he was, professionally. Everyone did. Felix Morgan. Maya Alvarez. They shook hands. Maya said, "If you're here to steal our building, we're currently too understaffed to fight you." Felix smiled. "I'm off duty. Convenient." I thought so. She handed me back the clipboard. Studio B needs a decision before tomorrow. I'll call the school. Call God too. She walked away. Felix watched her go. I like her. She'd hate hearing that. I'll tell her later. Then a group of teenagers burst through the hall, carrying pieces of painted cardboard that were apparently part of a set. One of them nearly hit Felix with a fake tree. He stepped aside. "Sorry." Felix looked at me. "Do you always work like this?" "This is calm." A girl shouted from Studio A. "Simon, do we have more extension cords?" "No." A beat. "Can we buy some?" "No." "Why?" "Because I like saying no." Felix laughed. I found him watching me again. Not the room. Me. I knew that look now. It did something unpleasantly effective to my concentration. "Stop that," I said. "What?" Looking pleased. "I am pleased." "Why?" "You're different here." I should have made a joke. Normally I would have. Instead I said, "Different good?" Felix's expression shifted. Very. That answer stayed between us longer than I expected. Then Maya called my name from down the hall, and the moment broke. By the time we finally left, Harbor House was almost empty. The building smelled faintly of paint, dust, and the cleaning solution our landlord bought in industrial quantities. Felix glanced into Studio B as we passed. Half the floor was covered with plastic sheeting. "You really lose this place in 7 months?" "2 of the rooms. That's most of your rehearsal capacity." "I can count." "I wasn't suggesting you couldn't. You had the tone." "What tone?" "The one where you're about to make a recommendation." Felix stopped walking. I wasn't. I looked at him. He looked honestly surprised. That irritated me for no reasonable reason. We kept walking. Outside, he didn't offer Bellwether rehearsal space. He didn't suggest a donor. He didn't tell me he knew somebody at the city. He didn't fix anything. He just said, "I didn't realize it was that tight. Now you do." Yes. That should have been the end of it. Instead, I spent half of dinner wondering whether I had wanted him to offer something just so I could refuse it. 3 days before the final presentation, we went back to our usual restaurant. The owner had started greeting us together. That felt dangerously domestic. We were halfway through dinner when Felix said, "Your occupancy estimates are optimistic." I put down my fork. We said no proposal talk. "You brought up Bellwether's staffing model 10 minutes ago. That was a joke. It was a criticism disguised as a joke. That's how jokes work." "No, that's how you work." The sentence was light. The effect wasn't. I reached for my water. "We're not doing this." Felix leaned back. "Doing what?" "Turning dinner into committee review. I'm not reviewing you." "Good. You know, Saying good like that doesn't actually end the conversation. It should. He looked at me for a second too long. I smiled, deliberately. So, your sister's still coming next weekend? The change of subject was obvious. Felix noticed. Of course he did. For 1 second I thought he would refuse to follow me. Then he said, Sunday afternoon. See? Healthy communication. His mouth twitched. We moved on. But something had shifted. Not enough for a fight. Enough for me to feel it. Later, outside the restaurant, Felix kissed me against the brick beside the entrance. I kissed him back immediately. Wanting him was still easy. That was almost the problem. 2 nights later, Felix came to my apartment with no professional reason to be there. No board event. No rehearsal ending nearby. No convenient excuse. He brought a bottle of wine I had mocked on our 3rd date because the label looked designed by a dentist. You remembered. I remember criticism. That explains your career. He took off his jacket. I had spent the whole day reviewing our final presentation. He had spent his whole day doing the same. And neither of us mentioned Calder for almost an hour. That surprised me. We ate takeout at my kitchen counter. Felix told me about his sister's ongoing war with a neighbor over a maple tree. I told him my mother had sent me another article about cholesterol, despite the fact that my cholesterol was fine. He said mothers didn't need evidence. I told him directors shouldn't make medical claims. He asked why I owned 4 identical black t-shirts if I was supposedly creative. I told him they were different shades. He said they were all black. I told him that was why theater people couldn't be trusted with visual nuance. At some point, we moved to the couch. His knee rested against mine. Nothing dramatic happened. That mattered more than I expected. For weeks, our dates had had momentum. A restaurant, a show, an argument, a kiss, an invitation upstairs. This was quieter. Felix leaned his head back against the couch. Can I ask you something that has nothing to do with Calder? Depends. On what? Whether I'm going to like the question. He turned his head. Do you ever tell anyone when you're having a bad day before you've fixed it? I stared at him. That's an aggressive use of leisure time. I'm serious. I know. He waited. I looked toward the dark television screen. My staff. After you've fixed it. My mother. After you've edited it. Are you collecting evidence? No. You sound like you're collecting evidence. Felix exhaled through his nose. I told you. I remember criticism. I should have changed the subject. Instead, I said, my last relationship was bad at conflict. Felix's expression changed, but he didn't interrupt. He didn't yell, I said. That would have been easier. He disappeared inside himself. If we argued, he'd become polite for 3 days. Felix frowned. Polite? Very. Extremely. Like customer service. That's horrifying. It was. I smiled, but only because the alternative felt too exposed. So eventually, I got good at deciding which things were worth 3 days of politeness. Felix looked at me for a long time. That sounds exhausting. It was efficient. Simon. There. That's the face. What face? The one where you think you've understood something. I think you've told me something. Not the same thing. No. He accepted that. That helped. Then he said, for the record, if I'm angry at you, I'll probably be incredibly obvious. I'd already gathered that, and if I want space, I'll say it. Good. He smiled slightly. You used the word. I use it correctly. He leaned closer. So if we disagree, we will. Frequently. Probably before breakfast. You don't have to make it safe for me. The sentence landed somewhere I couldn't immediately reach. I looked at him. Felix didn't try to explain it. He just waited. That was unusual for him. I touched his face, then kissed him. Slowly this time. Not after an argument. Not because we were charged up from proving each other wrong. Because he was there. Because I wanted him there. When he left later, I stood in my kitchen and realized the final presentation was 48 hours away. For the first time, I wasn't only worried that I might lose Calder Foundry. I was worried about what losing would make me do with Felix. The final presentation was held in a municipal meeting room designed by someone who hated both acoustics and human comfort. The chairs were bolted together in rows. The lights were too bright. There were no windows. Every nonprofit leader in Providence had apparently attended at least one major emotional event in a room exactly like it. Maya sat beside me with our printed materials stacked in a folder on her lap. You look calm, she said. I am calm. You reorganized your notes 4 times. They needed hierarchy. They're numbered. Exactly. Across the aisle, Felix stood talking to Bellwether's board chair. He wore navy, no tie. Of course. Our eyes met. No smile. Then, very slightly, he lifted one eyebrow. I hated that it worked. I looked away first. Martin Shaw opened the meeting with a description of the selection process: financial sustainability, community impact, program reach, building utilization, capital readiness. Blah, blah, blah. Democracy. Harbor House presented first. Normally I liked presenting, not because I loved attention. I loved the moment when a complicated argument finally became simple enough for a room to understand. I walked them through our youth enrollment numbers, our partnerships, the programs we'd have to reduce if we lost 2 rooms at the end of the year. I showed how Calder Foundry could function throughout the day, rather than only during evening performances. I talked about teenagers who could walk there from 3 public schools. I talked about rehearsal access. I talked about a building being useful before it became impressive. The committee asked hard questions. I answered them. Maya handled operations. Our board treasurer handled finance. Nobody collapsed. Nobody lied. When we finished, I knew we'd done well. That feeling lasted approximately 12 minutes. Then Felix stood up. I had seen him direct actors. I had seen him charm donors. I had seen him half naked in his kitchen, complaining about my refusal to buy decent olive oil. I had never seen him do this. He didn't begin with Bellwether. He began with the building. He described Calder Foundry as infrastructure. Not a prize, not a symbol. Infrastructure. Something that could support rehearsals, performances, education programs, touring work, rentals, workshops, and the smaller organizations that didn't have staff to operate their own venues. I almost rolled my eyes. Then he showed the numbers. Damn him. Bellwether had built a rental model into the proposal that kept almost 40% of the building available to outside organizations at subsidized rates. Maya leaned toward me. That's new. I know. Did you know? No. That mattered. We had rules. Felix had kept them. He moved to their education schedule. The community performances I'd overheard him defending weren't a side project. They were embedded in the plan. Then he made the point I had been hoping he wouldn't. Bellwether had a stronger capital reserve. If construction costs increased, they could absorb more of the risk without returning to the city for emergency support. I stared at the table. Maya whispered, "Don't look like that." Like what? Like you're mentally setting his building on fire. I have principles. You have eyebrows. I relaxed my face. Felix moved into questions. A committee member asked whether Bellwether's professional performance schedule would eventually crowd out community access. There it was, the weak point. I sat up. Felix answered well. Not perfectly. Well. Then public comment opened. Representatives from both organizations spoke. So did neighborhood leaders, artists, parents, a high school theater teacher who had clearly decided this meeting was her Super Bowl. By the time Martin invited the finalists to respond to each other's presentations, the room had been listening for almost 2 hours. I should have been tired. Instead, I felt sharp. Felix stood at one microphone. I stood at the other. Martin said, "Mr. Carver, you raised concerns in your written submission about prime hour availability. Would you like to address that now?" I looked at Felix. He knew what was coming. Yes. I turned toward the committee. Bellwether's rental commitment is meaningful. But prime hours are still prime hours. If youth groups and smaller organizations technically have access, but the most useful evening and weekend blocks consistently belong to Bellwether Productions, then the access isn't equal in practice. Felix leaned toward his microphone. That's not what our calendar proposes. Not in year 1 or year 2. You don't know what your production schedule looks like in year 4. Neither do you. I know mine doesn't include 3 full theatrical runs occupying the main floor. No. Yours includes multiple overlapping youth programs competing for rooms that don't yet exist. A few people laughed, not cruelly. The room liked us this way. I did not, which was inconvenient, because I also loved him this way. Not loved, maybe loved. The word wasn't the problem. The fact that Felix refused to make himself smaller for me was, and I was suddenly, painfully aware that I did not want him to. I wanted to beat him at full strength. That realization felt romantic for approximately half a second. Then Felix made a stronger argument than mine. The committee chair asked whether Bellwether would prioritize its own ticketed work over no-cost community use during budget pressure. Felix didn't evade. Sometimes, yes. The room shifted. He continued. If the question is whether we can promise every difficult financial decision will favor the most generous use of the building, no, I don't think any responsible operator should promise that. I looked at him. That was risky. He knew it. But we can make those decisions visible. We can publish utilization. We can set minimum access hours. We can build accountability into the lease, rather than asking the city to trust our intentions. Maya exhaled beside me. That's good. I know. I hated saying it. I hated meaning it more. After the forum, people gathered in the hallway like survivors of an extremely polite natural disaster. Felix was trapped in conversation with 3 board members. I escaped outside. He found me half a block away. You left. I walked. That's what leaving usually looks like. You were busy being congratulated. So were you. Not enough. He fell into step beside me. The night was warm. My tie had been in my pocket since the second committee question. Felix's sleeves were rolled. Obviously. We walked another half block. Then he said, "Well?" I knew exactly what he meant. I pretended not to. Well, what? Don't do that. Do what? Make me ask you whether I was good. I looked at him. There was no teasing in his face now. That surprised me. Felix wanted my opinion. Not because I was a competitor, because I was me. I shoved my hands into my pockets. I hated how good that was. He smiled. Thank you. That wasn't a compliment. It absolutely was. Your capital section was obnoxious. Strong. Obnoxiously strong. I'll take it. And your answer about access was smart. Simon. What? You're making me uncomfortable. Good. We reached a quieter block. Felix stopped walking. I turned back. He was looking at me in that direct way that always made everything around him seem temporarily less important. You were good too, he said. I know. I mean it. I looked away. Your last answer was better than mine. That pulled my attention back. Felix Morgan did not hand out victories recreationally. Which one? Public transit. I should have included more about late-night access. I stared at him. You know you're allowed to lie to your boyfriend. Not about zoning. I laughed. He stepped closer. We were still on a public sidewalk. Nobody cared. Felix touched 2 fingers to the front of my shirt. Not enough to pull me toward him. Just enough that I could feel the contact. I want the building, he said. I know. I want you too. There was no performance in it. No cleverness. My chest tightened anyway. I know that too. Good. Then I kissed him. It wasn't soft. It wasn't comforting. It had too much of the meeting still inside it. 2 hours of disagreement. 3 months of competition. 6 weeks of wanting. His hand moved to the back of my neck. Mine caught at his waist. For a few seconds, being furious that he might beat me and wanting him closer were not contradictory feelings. They were the same heat. When we pulled apart, Felix looked annoyingly pleased. Still Saturday? He asked. Yes. Even if the decision comes before then. It won't. It might. You're terrible at romance. You keep showing up. So do you. The decision came Friday at 2:17 in the afternoon. I knew because I was standing beside Maya's desk when the email arrived. She opened it. Read the first line. Stopped breathing. I didn't need her to say anything. Tell me. She turned the monitor. The city had awarded the primary Calder Foundry lease to Bellwether Theater. For a moment, the office became very quiet. Then reality resumed all at once. Maya swore. Someone from the program team came in, asking what happened. My board chair called. Another email arrived from the city, offering to meet about transition support and alternative municipal spaces. None of it mattered for the first 10 seconds. Felix had won. I had lost. Not abstractly, not eventually. Now. I spent the next 2 hours doing my job. That meant telling staff before rumors reached them. It meant reminding everyone that Harbor House still existed. It meant not pretending the loss was smaller than it was. We would have to split programming, delay expansion, renegotiate 2 partnerships, probably cut enrollment for at least 1 cycle. Maya stood beside me after the final staff meeting. You okay? No. Good. I looked at her. She shrugged. I'd be worried if you were. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. At 4:40, I finally looked. Felix had sent one message. No apology, no celebration, no careful paragraph. Are we still on for 8? I stared at the screen. Canceling would have been easy. Reasonable even. I could have said I needed the night with my staff. I could have said I was tired. I could have made him wait until I was capable of being gracious. Instead, I typed, yes. At 7:58, I walked into the restaurant. Felix was already there. He saw me. For half a second, before he could stop himself, his face was bright, happy. He had won the biggest professional opportunity of his career. Of course he was happy. Then he looked at me and tried not to be. That made me angrier than the happiness did. Felix stood when I reached the table. That annoyed me too. Not because standing was wrong, because it was considerate, and I didn't want considerate from him yet. Hi, he said. Hi. I sat down. He did the same. For a few seconds, neither of us touched the menus. Felix looked different from the man I'd seen across committee rooms for months. Not physically. He was still wearing the same dark shirt he'd had on at Bellwether that morning. His hair was slightly out of place, probably because he'd spent the afternoon being hugged by people who had waited years for a permanent building. But something in him was lighter. He had won. I could see it. He was trying not to let me. Don't, I said. His eyebrows pulled together. Don't what? Do that thing with your face. What thing? The funeral thing. I'm not doing a funeral thing. You look like someone's dog died. I was trying not to be an asshole. You're failing in a different direction. He leaned back. Okay. A server came over. We ordered drinks. Felix waited until she left. What am I allowed to look like? I laughed once. Not because it was funny. There. That's exactly the problem. What is? You're asking me to give you a correct setting. I'm trying to figure out what you need. I don't know. Fine. He looked down at the menu. I hated the word coming from him, almost as much as he hated it coming from me. You're happy, I said. Felix looked up. Yes. The answer landed hard. I appreciated him for saying it anyway. He rubbed a thumb against the edge of the menu. I'm also worried about you. I don't want those two things combined. What does that mean? It means don't turn your winning into something I have to comfort you about. His face changed. I wasn't. Good. Simon, what? You've been here 4 minutes, and you're already correcting my interpretation. I am telling you what I was doing. Yes, repeatedly. The drinks arrived. I took a long swallow of mine. Felix didn't touch his. I had imagined this dinner 3 different ways that afternoon. In one, I was gracious. In another, I was cold. In the third, we ignored the decision and somehow talked about television for 2 hours. Reality was worse. Reality was that I still liked looking at him. I still wanted to know how his day had gone. I also wanted to throw a bread roll at his head. Felix finally said, "We don't have to talk about Calder. That's ridiculous. It doesn't have to be tonight. You got the building today." "Yes. And I'm supposed to ask how your sister's garden is doing. Her garden is a disaster. I don't care." I know. That almost made me smile. Almost. Our food came. For a while, eating gave us something to do. Then Felix made the mistake. It wasn't a large mistake. That was probably why it hit so hard. He said, "I think the committee was probably looking at operating risk more heavily than we expected." I put down my fork. Felix stopped. "I sat through the decision, Felix." "I know. I don't need the director's commentary. I wasn't giving you commentary. You absolutely were. I was trying to say, I don't think they rejected Harbor House's mission. That's better. What is? Now you're explaining why I shouldn't feel as bad." His jaw tightened. "I didn't say that." "No. You found a more elegant way. I'm not trying to manage your feelings. You're doing a terrible impression of someone who isn't." Felix looked away. His hand closed around his glass. There was that podium grip again, just smaller. "All right," he said. "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know." "Then stop punishing me for guessing wrong." The sentence hit cleanly. I stared at him. He looked immediately like he wanted it back. I didn't let him. "Punishing you?" That was a bad word. It was an interesting one. I said it badly. "No. I heard you. Simon, you're right. This is clearly very difficult for you." His expression hardened. "That's not fair." Neither was losing. Silence. There it was. The first honest thing I'd said all night. Not clever. Not mature. Barely reasonable. Felix sat very still. Then he said, No, it wasn't. Something in my chest loosened and tightened at the same time. I looked down. I'm not happy for you tonight, he nodded once. Okay. I waited. That was all. No speech about holding space. No reassurance that my disappointment was valid. Just okay. It made me angrier for about 3 seconds. Then less. I might be tomorrow, I said. You don't have to be. Don't make that noble. I'm not. You sound noble. I can't control your extremely hostile relationship with my voice. I laughed before I could stop myself. Felix smiled. The smile disappeared quickly, but it had happened. We finished dinner without solving anything. At one point, he told me Bellwether's board chair had cried. I said I didn't want to hear about Bellwether. 5 minutes later, I asked whether the staff knew yet. Felix answered carefully. I told him to stop answering carefully. He told me I was impossible. I said that was not new information. By the time we stepped outside, I was exhausted. Felix stood beside me under the restaurant awning. Do you want me to walk you home? No. He nodded. That annoyed me. You're allowed to argue. About whether you want me to walk you home? Not that specifically. Simon. I know. He waited. The street smelled like warm pavement and someone's cigarette from half a block away. I looked at him. I am going home, I said. I'm still dating you. I just don't want to look at you for the next hour. Felix's mouth twitched. He tried to stop it. Do not laugh. I'm not. You are visibly laughing inside your face. That's not a thing. It is on you. He took a breath. All right. All right. Then neither of us moved. Normally this was where we kissed. We both knew it. I didn't want to. Not because I wanted to punish him. Because kissing him would have made me feel better. And I wasn't ready to feel better. I stepped backward. Good night. Felix didn't make it dramatic. Good night, Simon. The next morning, Harbor House still didn't have a building. That was useful. Nothing about my romantic life changed the spreadsheet Maya put in front of me at 9:15. We can save 80% of fall enrollment if the Westbridge School partnership expands, she said. What do they want? More weekend access to our instructors. Possible. And the warehouse on Manton Avenue is still available. It's half the size. It's also half the rent. The rehearsal floor is concrete. We can put in sprung sections. I looked at her. You've been waiting to say that. For 6 days, we spent 3 hours rebuilding the next year. Not metaphorically, literally. Rooms, schedules, costs, what could move, what could not. By lunch, the disaster had become a plan I disliked, instead of an abyss. That was progress. Felix didn't text until 1:30. Hope today sucks less. I stared at the message, then wrote, marginally. 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then, I'll take marginally. No offer to call, no solutions, no attempt to fix Harbor House. I put the phone away. That evening, Bellwether announced Calder Foundry publicly. Photos appeared online. Felix was in several of them. He looked happy. I closed the app, opened it again 10 minutes later, closed it harder. By Sunday, 2 things were true. I was still angry. I missed him. Neither fact canceled the other. I called him that afternoon. He answered on the second ring. Hi. Hi. A pause. Then Felix said, Is this a social call, or am I about to be audited? You're very funny for someone who owns a building now. We lease it. See? That's why I called. Precision. He laughed. I could hear the relief underneath it. I was relieved too. That irritated me less than I expected. We have a warehouse option, I said. Felix went quiet. Not the dangerous kind. The waiting kind. Okay. You're allowed 1 question. Only 1? Maybe 2 if they're excellent, he thought. Do you want the warehouse? I hadn't expected that. Not, is it big enough? Not, can you afford it? Do you want it? I don't know yet. Okay. And you are not allowed to tell me what you'd do. I wasn't going to. You were thinking loudly. I don't think that's medically possible. It is on you. Another pause. Then Felix said, Are you free Thursday? I almost said I needed to check. I didn't. Yes. Dinner? Yes. No proposal talk? I looked around my apartment. At nothing. At everything. Questions. I said. No solutions. Felix was quiet for half a second. Deal. By Thursday, I had decided I wanted the warehouse. Not loved it. Not believed the universe had secretly redirected Harbor House toward something better. I wanted it because it worked. That was different. The building sat 3 blocks from a bus line, had one large open room we could divide, 2 smaller offices, and a landlord who had looked genuinely surprised when Maya asked whether teenagers were allowed inside. The floor was still concrete. The bathrooms needed work. The front windows faced a tire shop. It was not Calder Foundry. I signed a letter of intent anyway. Maya watched me initial the last page. You look disappointed. I am. You're also smiling. I contain multitudes. You contain a martyr complex and 2 granola bars. Those are separate things. She took the papers. We can make this work. I nodded. That sentence no longer sounded like consolation. It sounded like work. At 6:40 that evening, I met Felix, downtown. We had agreed on dinner. Instead, we found ourselves standing across the street from Calder Foundry. I hadn't planned that. The restaurant was 2 blocks away, and the building was simply there. A temporary Bellwether banner had already appeared above the entrance. Coming soon. I stopped walking. Felix stopped too. The foundry looked better at night than I remembered. Tall brick walls, industrial windows. The city had added exterior lights since the final presentation, and for the first time, I could see what Felix had probably been seeing in his head for months. A theater, people outside before a show, students carrying costumes through the side entrance, actors complaining about rehearsal schedules. Felix beside me went very still. That old version of him would have filled the silence, explained the renovation timeline, told me why the loading entrance mattered, maybe apologized for liking any of it. This version said nothing. I looked at him. He kept his eyes on the building. You're doing it again. His head turned. Doing what? Trying not to have a face. I have a face. It's currently under administrative review. That got a small laugh. Then silence again. Felix put his hands into his jacket pockets. I knew what he was waiting for. Permission. For once, I understood why. The annoying part was that I wanted to give it, not because I was suddenly fine. I wasn't. The banner still made something in my stomach tighten. I thought about Harbor House losing enrollment, about Maya rebuilding schedules, about the warehouse floor, about all the things we would have done with 30,000 square feet if my presentation had been the one the committee preferred. Then I looked at Felix. Tell me the part you're excited about. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes searched my face. I hated that too. Don't make me ask twice. His mouth moved, almost a smile. The rehearsal room. Of course. What about it? It's stupid. Felix. We've never had a proper one. I waited. He looked back at the building. Our actors rehearse downstairs until a set build needs the room. Then they move upstairs. Then somebody books the upstairs space, and they end up rehearsing in the lobby. I knew some of that, not the rest. Felix continued. The foundry has a room behind the main hall. Nothing glamorous, but it's wide enough for a full cast. High ceiling, no audience access through it. He was warming now. I could hear it. We could leave tape marks on the floor overnight. We could keep rehearsal furniture in the same place for more than 24 hours. He laughed softly. That's what I'm excited about. Not the marquee, not the press release. Tape marks on a floor. The tightness in my stomach remained. Something else arrived beside it. I reached for his hand. Felix looked down, then at me. You can be happy, I said. He didn't turn it into a speech. Thanks. And I can still hate that you won. I know. Don't say that like you're emotionally advanced. I was saying 2 words. You managed to sound insufferable with both. That's experience. We started walking again. I kept his hand. At the restaurant, he asked about Harbor House. I told him about the warehouse. His eyebrows went up when I mentioned the square footage. I pointed my fork at him. Questions. No solutions. I remember. Your face already has 3 solutions. My face is under administrative review. I stared. Felix smiled. Do you want the warehouse? Yes. That came easier than it had on Sunday. Why? Because it works. That's a very Simon answer. No. A Simon answer would have involved a 6-minute argument about why it was objectively superior. True. I took a drink. It's not superior. Felix nodded. I went on. We'll lose some enrollment. Probably for 1 cycle. The partner school can absorb 2 programs. Maya found a way to stagger the weekend schedule. Another nod. And we're going to have to raise money for the floor. Felix inhaled. I held up 1 finger. No. I didn't say anything. You breathed like a donor. He laughed. Fine. There. What? That one was acceptable. The conversation moved somewhere else. His sister. My mother's obsession with sending me articles about cholesterol. A production at Bellwether that Felix thought was going to fail artistically and succeed financially, which offended him on a spiritual level. By dessert, I realized we had spent almost 40 minutes not discussing who had won. That felt different from avoiding it. Avoidance had tension. This was just dinner. 2 weeks later, Harbor House announced the warehouse lease. The social media response was kind. The board was relieved. Maya celebrated by buying a measuring laser and becoming unbearable. Bellwether began preliminary work at Calder Foundry. Felix complained about historic preservation paperwork. I told him to suffer. We kept dating, not elegantly every day. There were still moments when I heard Bellwether mentioned and felt the old sting. There were moments when Felix began turning one of my complaints into a debate, and I had to say, I am not taking questions. Sometimes he stopped. Sometimes he forgot. Sometimes I told him too late that I was angry. Sometimes I told him while I was still angry enough to say it badly. Apparently that was allowed. Felix wasn't especially graceful about everything either. One evening he came over after a terrible rehearsal and spent 10 minutes explaining why 3 separate people had been wrong, before finally admitting he had yelled at an actor who hadn't deserved it. "What did you do?" I asked. I apologized. "Well, no. Good." He pointed at me. "Don't. I'm enjoying this. I can tell." He sat beside me on the couch. For once, there was no argument left in him. I let our shoulders touch. "You don't have to make it cleaner than you were," I said. Felix slowly turned his head. I smiled. "You said it first." That was about acting. Art has applications. You're unbearable. And yet. He kissed me. 6 weeks after the fundraiser, the Arts Alliance held a roundtable on youth access funding. Caroline had arranged the seating. When I reached the conference room, I found printed cards in front of each microphone. Mine read, Simon Carver Harbor House Youth Arts. Felix's sat 3 places away. Between our names on the agenda was a bold heading, Simon Carver versus Felix Morgan. I stared at it. Caroline appeared beside me. "You like? It's subtle. People love you too. They need richer lives." Felix walked in carrying a folder. He saw the agenda. Then me. His mouth shifted into that half smile. There it was. An hour later, we were arguing about municipal matching funds. He thought my proposal relied too heavily on annual appropriations. I thought his alternative favored organizations already sophisticated enough to navigate private fundraising. Neither of us softened it. At one point, Felix said, "Simon is pretending the administrative burden doesn't exist because he enjoys making me sound old and capitalist." I leaned toward my microphone. Felix is 41 and owns theater binoculars. They were a gift. That's what old people say about binoculars. The room laughed. Felix shook his head. Then he dismantled one of my budget assumptions. I hated how good he was at it. That had not changed. I didn't need it to. Afterward, people stayed behind talking in small groups. I packed my notes. Felix appeared beside me. "Still dinner?" I looked at him. "Obviously." "You said my funding model was structurally elitist." "It is structurally elitist." "And you're having dinner with me?" "I contain multitudes." He smiled. 7:30. You haven't grown at all. That's not what you said last night." Felix went very still. I picked up my folder. "Come on." We left the conference room together. Nobody stopped us. Nobody gasped. Nobody needed to know. Outside, Felix started explaining why my matching fund proposal would collapse under a bad budget year. I let him get through about half of it. Then I said, "You get to be wrong after appetizers." He laughed and came with me.